Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Over 300 South Koreans who were detained in the United States are now on their way home, a week after they were arrested in a massive immigration raid at a Hyundai plant in Georgia. The charter flight is set to arrive in Seoul this afternoon. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says South Korea must either accept the bilateral trade framework deal reached in July or face tariffs. He says there's no flexibility in the agreement, ramping up pressure on Seoul. South Korea's ruling party unilaterally passed revised bills on special counsel investigations into the previous administration, which includes a probe into former President Yoon's martial law declaration and allegations against his wife, Kim Gun-hee. South Koreans that were detained in a U.S. immigration raid on a battery plant in Georgia are now on their way home after a week in detention. A charter flight carrying more than 300 workers is now on its way back to Seoul. Our Pyeongyang starts us off.
At 2:18 a.m. Thursday local time, the detained Koreans were released from the Folsom Detention Center. As agreed in advance with U.S. authorities, the workers left the detention facilities without handcuffs and shackles and wearing their regular clothes. Escorted by South Korean diplomatic officials, they boarded 8 buses that drove around 450 kilometers nonstop to Atlanta International Airport. Many workers appeared exhausted after a week in poor conditions, though some waved in relief to reporters through the tinted bus windows. At the airport, they bypassed the main terminal and completed departure procedures at the cargo terminal before boarding a waiting Korean Air charter plane. The flight departed Atlanta around noon with 316 Koreans on board, along with 14 foreign nationals from China, Japan, and Indonesia. One Korean chose to remain in the U.S. due to family ties. First Vice Foreign Minister Park In-ju, who traveled to the U.S. to help resolve the situation, and LG Energy Solutions CEO Kim Dong-myung also boarded the flight. After a 15-hour journey, the plane is scheduled to land at Incheon Airport at about 3 p.m. Korean time on Friday. The raid that led to the detentions took place on September 4th at the Hyundai LG Energy Solution battery plant construction site in Ellaville, Georgia, where U.S. immigration authorities took 475 people, including more than 300 Koreans, into custody. The workers had been slated for release on Wednesday, but their return was delayed by 1 day after President Donald Trump directed U.S. authorities to pause repatriation and consider allowing them to stay and help train U.S. workers. The shockwave of the ICE raid is expected to set back construction of the Hyundai LG Energy Solution plant in Georgia by at least 2 to 3 months. Hyundai Motor Company CEO Jose Munoz told Bloomberg the raid disrupted progress, but emphasized that the company remains firmly committed to the U.S. market. Pyeongyang, Arirang News.
In Seoul and Washington are preparing talks to improve the visa system after the mass detention of South Korean workers in Georgia ended with their voluntary departure. During a meeting between Seoul's Foreign Minister Cho Hyun and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Wednesday in Washington, Cho proposed forming a joint working group on visas. Officials say the group has not yet been formally launched, but discussions are expected to move quickly. Talks are likely to cover clearer rules for the B1 short-term business visa, the possibility of creating a new visa for Korean professionals, and efforts to expand the access to the H-1B visa, which allows skilled employment in the United States. South Korean workers detained in the immigration raid in Georgia are now on their way home, as we just heard. For more on this, we're joined today by Professor Min Jung-un, professor at Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Min, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So these workers will be returning to Seoul this afternoon, and Foreign Minister Cho Hyun says Washington has promised that these workers will not face disadvantages when they travel to the U.S. again in the future. Is it safe to say that the situation has now been completely resolved?
Yeah, personally, I think that it is safe to say that those workers will not face disadvantages when they travel back to the United States. Of course, we need to see what will actually happen when they travel back to the U.S. in the future. But anyway, I think that it would be safe for them to get back to the U.S. in the future. As you know, South Korean government secured assurances from its U.S. counterparts that the detained workers held in Georgia would face no re-entry issues when they get back to the U.S. In addition, the two countries made it clear that the detained workers would not be physically restrained like handcuffs on their way to the Atlanta airport to board the chartered flight. And more importantly, it was known that President Trump fully recognized this matter and ordered his cabinet to find a solution that there would be no problem when those skilled workers enter the U.S. and stay a while to do their jobs. And initially, the detained workers were supposed to board the chartered plane Wednesday afternoon, but the plane was delayed of unspecified U.S. circumstances. And as you reported, it was revealed that it's largely due to the fact that President Trump told his officials to encourage the South Koreans to stay in the country to continue their work. So I think what President Trump mentioned shows that there would be no disadvantages for the South Korean workers when re-entering the U.S. And South Korea understands this as confirmation that no records of illegal stay will be kept and that their return will be treated as a voluntary departure. So taken together, I believe that there would be no disadvantages when the skilled workers get back to the U.S. in the future.
Right, hopefully. And, they were supposed to board the flight on Wednesday initially, but it got delayed. And Seoul's foreign ministry says, like you just mentioned, this was because President Donald Trump asked these skilled Korean workers to stay there a little bit longer and train American workers. What's the story there? And is it a realistic plan for Korean companies to train American workers in fields such as shipbuilding or manufacturing?
Yes, and basically, I think it's a good sign that President Trump ordered the cabinet members and officials to figure out whether the South Korean workers wanted to stay and keep training the American workers during their stay. But we will see how it will work anyway. Anyway, as you mentioned, the President Trump wanted to figure out that if those skilled workers from South Korea wanted to stay and continue their work in the United States, and the President Trump recognized that they needed to stay in the United States because they needed to do their work because there would be no alternatives to do their job from the American workers, and they also needed to train the American workers for the very skilled jobs. And the Foreign Ministry of South Korea, Jo Hyun, mentioned that President Trump's consideration for South Korea in this manner was based on the deep bond forged between the two leaders during the successful South Korea-U.S. summit, as well as South Korea's consistent position regarding the detention issue. So I think that the detention issue could be resolved very fast because the South Korean government coped with it very speedily and appropriately. And personally, I'm really glad to see that those detained workers finally got back to home and relax, and hopefully they will get back to the United States for their job in the near future.
Right, absolutely. And what's important would be to keep this from happening again. And U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau is scheduled to visit South Korea tomorrow. Will this visa issue be on the agenda?
Well, I'm not sure about it. As you mentioned, it is known that he will make a two-day trip to Seoul from Saturday through Sunday, and it will be his first visit to South Korea. And I think his visit to South Korea this time was planned well before the detention issue, and I think the two sides already fixed the agendas that they would talk about during the meetings. Specifically, it is known that the two countries would talk about the ROK-US alliance and other diplomatic and security issues like alliance modernization and the strategic flexibility of U.S. forces in South Korea. But considering the importance of the detention issue, there is a possibility that he can confirm how the Trump government perceived it and what it could do to solve the problem. And the South Korean counterparts can also utilize his visit to emphasize how important this detention issue can be for South Korea and the South Korean people, and ask for finding a solution that there would be no problem that South Korean skilled workers can stay and work in the United States in terms of creating the new type of visa for South Korean skilled workers, like E4 visa or something like that.
Right, we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Min, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks so much.
Meanwhile, on trade issues, the United States says South Korea must either accept the bilateral trade framework deal reached in July or face tariffs, pressuring Seoul to sign the agreement. South Korea's industry minister has now departed to Washington as negotiations remain deadlocked over key details. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick warned Thursday that South Korea must either accept the bilateral trade framework deal reached in July or face tariffs as negotiations remain deadlocked over key details. Speaking in an interview with CNBC, Lutnick emphasized that there is no flexibility in the agreement. Under the deal, Washington pledged to lower reciprocal tariffs on South Korean goods to 15%, down from the proposed 25%, in return for Seoul's commitment to investing $350 billion in the United States, along with other promises. But the two governments have yet to agree on how the investment package will be structured, how profits will be shared, and other terms. Lutnick pointed to South Korean President Lee Jae-myung's visit to Washington last month, noting that no agreement was signed during his summit with President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, South Korea's industry minister Kim Jong-kwon departed for Washington on Thursday to hold follow-up negotiations. His office said he is expected to meet with Lutnick and other U.S. officials to discuss tariff issues and potential adjustments to the visa system in light of the mass detentions. Since late July, Seoul and Washington have been working to finalize the framework trade agreement, which was first announced on July 30th. In addition to lowering general tariffs on Korean goods, the Trump administration also agreed to cut tariffs on Korean automobiles from the current 25% down to 15%. Officials on both sides say the upcoming talks will be critical in determining whether the deal moves forward as envisioned or whether new tariff penalties will be imposed on South Korean exports to the United States. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Over at the National Assembly, a fierce confrontation broke out between lawmakers across the aisle after the ruling party unilaterally passed the revised bills on special counsel investigations into the previous administration. Now, this came a day after the rival parties had reached an agreement on the revisions. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
Despite bipartisan agreement, the ruling party pushed through its own version of the bills to reinforce the 3 special counsel investigations against the Yoon Suk-yeol government. At Thursday's plenary session, the party unilaterally passed revisions to the special counsel investigations into former President Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law declaration, allegations against former First Lady Kim Gon-hee, and the death of a Marine during flood relief operations in 2023. Under the bills, special investigations into the martial law attempt and the former First Lady could be extended from 150 to 180 days, while the probe into the Marine's death could be prolonged from 120 to 150 days. This comes a day after the floor leaders of the ruling Democratic Party and main opposition People Power Party agreed to keep the 3 special counsel investigations at their current durations and struck a compromise on staffing, allowing each team up to 10 additional personnel. However, on Thursday morning, the DP declared the negotiations had collapsed, explaining that there had been backlash within the party and that the PPP rejected its offer to resume talks.
I couldn't accept it, and since it went against the party leadership's position, I immediately ordered renegotiations. I was also quite surprised by what happened yesterday.
The PPP, which boycotted the vote, criticized the breakdown of the agreement, saying the DP will be responsible for any future disruptions in the National Assembly.
The original special counsel bill from the DP included many problematic provisions, such as unlimited investigation extensions and an expanded scope. After our party raised objections, a difficult compromise was reached. However, on President Lee Jae-myung's 100th day in office, the DP broke that agreement.
Meanwhile, the National Assembly passed a motion for the arrest of PPP lawmaker Kwon Song-dong with 173 for, 1 against, 1 abstention, and 2 invalid votes amid a PPP boycott. Last month, a special counsel team filed for an arrest warrant against Kwon for allegedly receiving illegal political funds from a former Unification Church official in 2022. 신하영, Arirang News.
One export industry on the rise is K-Beauty. You might be just thinking about simple lotion or makeup, but it goes beyond that. And at the K-Beauty Expo just outside of Seoul, everything is on display. Our Kim Do-yeon was there.
For an industry where appearances are everything, this year's K-Beauty Expo Korea is putting its best face forward. It opened its doors on Thursday with the 17th annual event, 30% larger than last year, hosting over 500 companies from 12 nations. K-Beauty brought in over $10 billion in exports last year. And at this expo, it is showing its diversity. It's not just lotion and sunblock at the booths. From hair products to skin healing devices, companies are showing their latest products to potential clients, with some deals offering up to 80% off. Here at the expo, you can even get your skin analyzed instantly with a 3D image generated. Here, you can see that I have freckles and need to start using sunblock. But at the heart of this event is connecting businesses. State-run trade agency Kotra has organized meetings with 166 hand-picked international buyers, with around 1,000 one-on-one meetings like this set up.
Every year the demand is so high. When we send out notices to attract buyers, we get many inquiries, and the countries are becoming more varied. We are receiving so many applications that it's almost impossible to keep up.
That confidence is especially strong in the U.S. market. Last year, South Korea surpassed France as the top cosmetic exporter to the United States, attracting buyers like Dwayne, who runs a spa in Detroit, Michigan. He started using and selling K-Beauty products just last year. Now, he's got 20 brands in his store.
If a client can purchase 3 pieces of skincare for the price of 1 U.S. brand, this is the same results. Or better, honestly. We are finding that they're hungry for the information.
One new hurdle, though, the 15% tariff.
It's not going to deter me from purchasing because the price is already very good.
And as the booths at the expo suggest, the K-beauty industry's growth wasn't driven by big companies. It is smaller companies that are selling on e-commerce overseas, such as Amazon. For this, Amazon Ads is a global sponsor for the first time. To help brands navigate the digital market, the expo is also hosting seminars like the K-Beauty Insight Concert, offering strategies on market trends and using AI for a competitive edge. The expo runs until Saturday. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. We begin in the United States and the investigation into the killing of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. The FBI has released images of a person of interest and is offering a reward of $100,000 for any information that could lead to an arrest. On Thursday, the FBI and the Utah Department of Public Safety shared 2 surveillance photos featuring a male person of interest. He was seen wearing a long-sleeve black shirt with an American flag motif, dark jeans, sunglasses, and a baseball cap. Authorities believe he's of college age. Law enforcement also recovered what they believe to be the murder weapon, a high-powered bolt-action rifle wrapped in a towel found in a wooded area near the shooting location. Forensic teams have gathered palm prints, a footwear impression, and forearm imprints from the scene. Authorities are looking at multiple leads in the hunt for the killer and are urging the public to come forward with any information that may help identify the suspect. President Donald Trump condemned the attack, calling Kirk a giant of his generation, and announced on Thursday that he will award Kirk the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The 31-year-old right-wing activist and a close ally of President Trump was shot dead while speaking at an event at a university in Utah on Wednesday. In Brazil, a panel of judges from the Supreme Court has convicted former President Jair Bolsonaro of plotting a coup after he lost the 2022 election. On Thursday, a 5-member judge panel of Brazil's Supreme Federal Court reached a majority verdict of 4-1, finding Bolsonaro guilty of multiple charges related to the coup plot. This includes participating in an armed criminal organization, attempting to violently abolish democratic rule, and trying to cling to power despite losing the election. Bolsonaro, already under house arrest, was not present for the verdict and denies all wrongdoing. He faces up to 40 years in prison when the panel formally delivers its ruling. However, additional votes are still pending on some charges. Meanwhile, several former high-ranking officials, including ministers and aides who took part in the plot, were also convicted by the same panel. Belarus released 52 political prisoners on Thursday following a diplomatic appeal by U.S. President Donald Trump to Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko. In exchange, the U.S. eased sanctions on Belarus's national airline, Belavia, allowing it to service and purchase key aircraft components, lifting some of the restrictions that have isolated it in the aviation sector. Those freed include 14 foreign nationals from the UK, France, Germany, and other countries. Despite the recent exchange, over 1,200 political prisoners remain jailed in Belarus. An iguana at a zoo in the United Kingdom gave birth to 8 healthy hatchlings at the end of August, despite having never mated with a male, according to reports on Wednesday. Telford's Exotic Zoo in Shropshire confirmed that the event occurred via a process called parthenogenesis, a rare reproductive method in which unfertilized eggs develop into embryos. All 8 babies are genetic clones of their mother, and they are currently being reared in a climate-controlled reptile nursery. While 2 of them will be sent to another zoo, the rest are expected to go on public display soon.
We need to get ready for a rainy one. Right now, the front line is in Jeju, where they're seeing torrential downpours with over 70 millimeters per hour of rain, with heavy rain alerts being in place. The rain will cover the rest of the south through the afternoon before expanding to the capital area. And by tonight, much needed rain will soak Gangwon-do province. But we're talking about significant totals today. Up to 150 millimeters or more is expected in southern Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, Chungcheong-namdo, and Jeollabuk-do provinces. The capital area could also get more than 100 millimeters of downpours, and most of the rain should taper off by tomorrow night. Rain and cloudy skies will bring down the highs into the 20s in most parts, at 28 degrees Celsius here in the capital, and Busan, Gwangju, Daegu both topping out at 27 degrees. With this rain, daytime highs will be even cooler tomorrow, and then another nationwide rain is expected by next Wednesday. Please stay safe and dry out there today.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.